that contributed to me being expelled at 14 and doing what I do.
What was one project where you looked back and you thought, wow, we did that? Have you ever uncovered something shocking behind a wall?
Yes.
What?
A skeleton.
Could you tell everyone watching how you got into this industry?
Thank you for inviting me, Sophie. I got into building through basically my family have always been in the building industry, so it just seemed a natural progression to take that role and sort of that path. I did come away from it for a short period of time. I went into tool and plant hire, but I soon came back to it and have been in it since.
Why did you leave and why did you come back?
At the time, I wasn't achieving what I thought I would have done and wasn't doing things within projects that I'd hoped to have done at the age I was at. But, when you're in your late teens and early 20s, you feel that you know best and you know better. Soon realised, obviously, that I didn't. And then once I sort of became grounded and realised what I needed to do to get me on that path, I got back into the industry.
So have you been in the industry always as self-employed, or do you ever work for a company? Because you said you worked with your family, so was it your family's company?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I worked for the family. I was employed by them to do the work that I was carrying out. It was very large scale things that we were doing. So it was like converting things like hotels, nightclubs, and then went on to some big commercial properties in London as well through doing that.
Could you ever picture yourself doing something different, or do you feel like this was always meant to be for you?
I've always enjoyed, obviously, the fact that you can create something and you're able to give something to someone that without your input, it wouldn't be there as such. It's not something you can just buy off the shelf. It's something you actually have to create. There's a lot of planning, a lot of consultation that goes into being able to deliver a building project. So it was nice that it was something I was able to do. I wasn't good at, like, in school. I wasn't unable. I just didn't want to be at school. I enjoyed being hands-on and sort of being around my family, working with them and doing what I needed to do. So that contributed to me being expelled at 14 and doing what I do.
What did you do to get expelled?
Just didn't do anything really. I was just being disruptive in the classroom, and I'd be the joker and would make everyone laugh and upset the teachers. They did get upset a bit more than I thought they should have done. They didn't quite see my point of view, but...
So what did your family say when you came home expelled from school?
They weren't fazed by it, and they were disappointed in the sense that where my dad is unable to read or write, they wanted me to do better than him, bearing in mind both my parents came from Malta, so they weren't used to being within an education system, because my dad didn't last. I think he left school about 9 or 10 years of age. He used to work the fields in Malta and then went out to Australia to work in an abattoir. My mum was married at 15, I think it was. So she'd left Malta and didn't stay in school, but she raised her 2 brothers and sister before she'd left from Malta to come to England anyway. So it's not like we have like a history of being in school, and it wasn't until our 4th brother that one of the 4 brothers as such actually did well in school.
So at what point did your family go into construction? Did they go into construction abroad or in the UK?
It was in the UK, and it wasn't. It was more the fact that they were in the hospitality industry. So when they were buying things like pubs, they were creating function halls. They bought an old naval army building and then created a hotel from that. So they've always created more within a structure once they've sort of bought it or leased it. So it was just their natural progression in what they were doing, and it was our job to deliver that. So we would create hotel rooms or function rooms or restaurants or places where they can get people would get married. So it was creating elements within a hotel or a restaurant or a pub that would bring more revenue in utilising the space correctly.
So how did they get those projects?
They started small. They started with like fish and chip shops, cafes, and then went into like pubs and bars. And being in a military town, because Chatham was thriving when they first came over, like in the early 70s. It was the dockyard was full of naval, and there was the barracks that had the army and the Gurkhas. So there was always people around. There was so much custom that was built just with the people there, and then you had their families and friends and people that would come down to visit. So the infrastructure was great for that time.
So is it all just completely word of mouth?
As in
Getting the projects?
the project was in house as such. We wasn't doing it for anyone else. It was retained obviously within the
Right.
family's projects themselves.
So being a builder and running a business, they're two completely different things.
Yeah.
How do you separate the two, and do you separate it? And also, have you learned a lot from your parents watching them run their own business? What are your takeaways from that?
It's difficult when you're naive, you're young, untrained, and you have different mindset and a different way of looking at things. It's very difficult. And then when you look at the financial element, where it's somebody else's money, they need to get a project finished so that they can create or generate income for themselves. The pressures are far more intense than when you're doing it for yourself, because if you was to rope in a friend or someone else to help you do a particular project within your own house or property, you have a much more relaxed approach. But when there's a financial strain in the sense that you're paying for people to do the work, so you might be paying contractors, you might be paying for architects, structural engineers. All of those financial elements have to sort of be put into the pot, and then that's what creates a difference in what you're doing.
Was there ever a moment when you were watching your parents run their own business where, for better or for worse, you watched something happen and you thought either that's what I'm going to do or that's not what I'm going to do?
I suppose it's a difficult one. There's elements in what they did, and it's not something you want to get involved in because you don't feel it's worth doing what they were doing for the money that they were getting. But then when you look from the other side, and then you realise that you're creating an income that will then be passed down, obviously, to next generations, or sort of it can be shared within family, that makes the whole thing worth it, because you're then working for each other and with each other, which is the great thing. So it's keeping it obviously within the family.
So how did you get to where you are now? Why did you decide to go and make your own company? Of course, you work with your brothers. Was that just something you knew from the get-go, or did you think about maybe going down other avenues?
Steve and I that work together work well together, because we both sort of help each other in the sort of the parts that we're weaker in, and the bits that we're better in we sort of excel, and then we pull the other one sort of across the line as such. So working with family is far more challenging than working with anybody else, because you work with somebody that you could potentially create and build a business with. You're far more open, honest, and able to say what you want to say. When you're working with family, you have to think it through sort of 3-4 times over before you even think of saying it, and you're always thinking of the consequence of what you've said and how that's going to be received before you even think of saying it. So there's a lot more thought process that goes into saying something to somebody that's you're related to or close to.
Okay, so you've just been kicked out of school.
Yeah.
Where did you go from then to get to where you are now?
So from being kicked out from school, I basically worked alongside my dad and my uncle, doing as much sort of building work as I could get involved in. It was the non-glamorous side of things. It was sweeping up, it was tidying the site, it was working my way up through the different trades. But that took many years to get involved in that. I'd do everything really that nobody else wanted to do. And when you're working with family and there are other contractors and tradespeople around, you have to work even harder to show that you're there for a reason, and you should be there because you want to be there, not because you're a relation of the person you're working for. So it's a hard journey to get involved in working in a building trade, and more so working with family. It got to a point where I wanted to sort of get out and do something different. So I started working for somebody I knew and started working in tool and plant hire. And then I basically stayed in that industry for about 5 years. So I was going from just small tools, went up to plant hire, and then went into specialist surveying equipment and escape equipment from confined spaces. Eventually got poached by a manufacturer of EDMs and dumpy levels, theodolites and stuff, which was Sakia. And then it got to a point where I wanted to get back into the building industry. I was on sites every day. I was just trying to sell the tools and the machinery to allow people to do their jobs. So I then got involved with one of my uncles and then started building again. And then a time came where I had a client base that wanted us to do bits of evenings, weekends, and Steve, my brother, and I started our business because we'd been promised so much work from people. Set up the business, and literally the week after the 2008 recession kicked in, so all the work that we'd been promised and all the money we thought we were going to be getting just sort of disappeared overnight. So we had to go out and then find work from any sort of estate, letting agent, any other builders, anybody, friends or family that wanted work. So we started doing that, and then we, slowly built the business up to where we are today. We've had lots of tough times, we've had some good times, but you've got to take all of that and then put it into the mix and just keep going and keep delivering and trying to do your best for your clients.
What was one project where you looked back and you thought, wow, we did that?
There's been a few really. There's a property that we did in Hatton Garden, which was originally one of my uncle's jobs, which was working for a big contractor, Norwest Hulst. And we basically took the whole block of this building from commercial storage really and put them into luxury flats. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, one of my clients had put an ad on Facebook to say that she'd been quoted £40,000 labour only to fit out a bathroom in Hatton Garden. So I contacted her and asked her where the property was, and she asked me to go and meet her and do a survey. So when I went there, I was in shock that it was actually the building that we'd converted. Out of all of the buildings on Hatton Garden, it was that very one. So during COVID, we'd put in a new kitchen, bathroom, ensuite, second bedroom, which had a Murphy bed, aircon unit. So we completely fitted out this flat, luxury fittings, had Toto toilets, with the toilets that were heated seats, they wash you, dry you. And then we basically completed that to the client's finish. We delivered that, and then 13 months later, the flat above had flooded the flat below. So we're literally at the point now where we're about to put the appliances back in, but we had to strip all of like the oak architraves, skirting, flooring, doors. All the appliances were completely short-circuited. So we've had to completely refit that again for the client. And some of the original spec had become obsolete and discontinued. So we had to find alternatives for the client. So that has been one of the projects that has been one of the most memorable for good and bad reasons.
I was just about to ask you, what's the worst project that you've had where everything went wrong? Was that one of them?
No, that wasn't. We had one in central London again. It was just off of Tottenham Court Road, and we were the builder, and we were treated as if like we were completely like at the bottom of the pile. So what had to happen was all the floors had to be raised because they had all dropped and they weren't high enough. So the structural engineer had done all of their calculations for us to raise all of the floors, and we pointed out to them that if you put the floors up that much, the roof's actually going to open up at the top. And they said, no, we've done all of our calculations, so we know what we're doing, with this, with that. So we had these, I think, 1,000-ton props that we had to put in corners of the building, prop them up slowly to the specification we were given. Once we'd got up to 2 or 3 levels, the roof had started to open up. And they come back, obviously, with humble pie asking if we can start lowering them because we had to reinstate the roof that had opened up. So there's good and bad in that, but that was probably one of the most memorable horror jobs that we were involved in.
So from when you first got into the industry, when you were first taking on your projects, I'm sure there's a big difference between how you were handling things at first to how you manage things now. Would you say there's a big difference, or would you say it's relatively the same?
There's a massive difference when you start out, and clients are asking you, can you do a refurbishment? Can you change a kitchen, a bathroom, do plastering or redecorating? You take each job and you price it in that respect as well. When you get bigger, you then get given more opportunities, and the tasks seem far bigger because you're sort of project managing the job, but you're then liaising with architects, structural engineers, building control. There might even be interior designers. So you're having to deal with the client, but also deal with professionals that know what they're doing in their field and bring all of that together for the client. There's never been a job that has ever been given to us that has been done to a drawing or to a specification. A client will always deviate when they see that something is going well or it's looking better than they thought it would, and they want to put their input into that. We struggle to get out of people's properties. Getting in, there's a tender process and there's negotiations and sort of interviews and stuff that you have to do with clients to get in, to do the work for them. But once we start doing work, we then get given more and more and more work, and we do get a lot of repeat business, and we do get a lot of family, friends, and referrals for us to go into.
If I was looking for a builder or anyone in the trade, an architect or an engineer, to work with, or if I needed one on my project and I have nothing to do with the industry, what would you say is the best thing for me to look out for to avoid a cowboy builder or a cowboy engineer and architect?
Yeah, you're never really going to know how good or bad somebody is until you see their work. See if you can get referrals or recommendations from people that have used that particular contractor. Things will always go wrong. There's always going to be mess, dust, and things to consider when you have any building work done in your home. The measures you put in place to try and limit those are what set a good and a bad builder apart. Somebody that takes consideration for your space and wants to deliver the project for you. People buy from people, and you have to be somebody that a client will get on with. There's going to be awkward conversations within a job where, the client wants something, may want an increase on that. So when it comes to figures and the specification, that's where communication's key.
How often are you pulled into jobs from other builders that you have to rectify?
Not so much like at the moment or lately, but there was a time pre-COVID, and I'd say probably between 2014 to 2017, there was a lot of building work that had been carried out by Eastern European builders that, for whatever reason, had pulled off from site or been removed from site because the client wasn't happy with their work. There was times where we had quoted for work, lost it, then had to go back and rip out what somebody else had done and do it as the client had, required and wanted. So that's disheartening when, you could have created that solution from the start. You wasn't quite the right fit at that time, whether it's to do with personality or whether it's to do with the cost of to deliver a job. But then a client will realise that they should have paid the money that is required. But with our quotations, it's detailed, and people will know exactly what we're trying to deliver, and we'll always explain what it is that we're doing. We're at the end of the phone, on an email, so we'll always try and keep in constant communication.
So you mentioned about you'll price for projects and then you'll lose them. Is there one that you've priced for that you lost that you still think about to this day?
I would say that the job that I would say I was most upset about losing was one last year at Lamberhurst Vineyard. It was a nice unit to the rear of that, which was a timber-clad barn conversion, and that was being converted from an office space into a space that the charity were going to use as their head office. So that was one that I was quite upset about losing, which I do take offence to ones that you've put a lot of time and effort into, and you don't even get an explanation as to why you've lost it, because there are conversations that can be had as to what things you could do slightly differently, or you could change the client's expectations of what they're trying to achieve, but bring that into budget for them.
So, of course, everything with Pillars of Property, we started it because everyone knew everyone, but how do we get everyone together in one go, and how can we get everything to be more cohesive? So we actually worked together on a lot of projects, so I thought it'd be quite nice if you could tell us about one of the projects that we're working on.
Yeah, sure. We're working on a property in Canterbury, which is converting a commercial property into residential. And it's been a fun project because everybody has been involved in it with regards to like Murdad and Adkins have been involved. We're also working with Kingsley from Designscape. Yeah, it's been a fun project because we've been changing the commercial aspects of this building into the residential side of what the client wants to achieve. The client wanted to maintain a commercial feel, so we've got open rolled baths. We've also got a shower which is a luxury design but very simple and sympathetic to the fabric of the building. He's wanted to keep exposed brickwork, which has also been fun to do with plastered walls to the side of that. It's been decorated, new kitchen. It's got air source heat pumps, so it's been brought up into the sort of modern era with the technology that it's got, but it's also been very sort of mindful of its history and heritage.
We've worked on a few projects together so far. What would you say is your most favourite project that you've worked on with Designscape?
I would say the drawings are so easy to work with. The fact that we can all speak to each other if we have any problems allows us to overcome any hurdles that we face. Murdad and Kingsley are always at the end of the phone, and from time to time they're actually able to get hold of me as well. So it's nice to have that relationship.
So, also, this is not in the questions. I'm just curious. What do you think so far about Pillars of Property?
Um, I think it's brilliant from when we had that first meeting to the type of people we had in that room, the influence that those people have, but nobody had any egos, no hidden agendas. Everybody was just friendly, welcoming. It was just an open, honest, and it wasn't even like, and it didn't feel like a networking thing. It just felt like everybody knew what each other was about, and there wasn't any awkward, salesy type conversations. It was all about how they were as people, how they were doing as companies, opposed to how well they're doing. Obviously, like within financial side of things, it wasn't about that. There was no egos, and when you look at the people that were there, it's I don't know. I don't know. It was humbling to an extent. I know that's probably the wrong word, but everybody just wanted to be there for the right reason.
You know what I found quite interesting? When we had the discussion panel of yourself, Murdad, and Kingsley, I actually found it really refreshing when you all stood up and then all explained from all your points of view about different sections of the industry and how it's impacting everyone in that room, because obviously we had a wide array of people there
Yeah.
from all the professions within the industry.
Yeah.
And it was quite heartwarming to see everyone actually firing out their questions and then having the answers in the room as well, because obviously what one person specialises in, it will cross over into a different field that they won't know, but then the person is there to ask. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I agree, and it was nice that Kingsley had stood up first and had said what he felt about how well the government are pushing for the ability to build more properties quicker with the restrictions and the red tape sort of being reduced or cut away as such, allowing builders just to build. Then I came back in my my sort of my speech saying that the cost of materials and labour was so expensive, and that was hindering us from being able to not only win work but to actually carry it out. So there were both conflicting ideas and angles that we both went with, but people came up to me and said, "Oh, I actually, think what you said was right over what Kingsley said." And some people say, "Well, what Kingsley said is right, but what you said is going to sort of slow down the process of what Kingsley has said." So it was nice to sort of have those different views, and people weren't holding back from the way that they thought, because they knew that by being open and honest in the way that they think, it's going to help everybody sort of move forward, and that's what construction is about.
I feel like the event that we had, it was very much relaxed. We all know each other. We're all friends. Let's sit down, shop talk, business. How do you feel like the event that we all held together differentiates from other events?
I think it was where everybody within that room was relative to construction, property, and the positive effects of those two combining. To have planners in a room, designers in a room, architects, structural engineers, estate agents, financial planners, all of those people are relevant when it comes to putting a project, how big or small that is, together. It's good to have those people and be able to, pick up the phone or send an email to those people. People within that meeting have reached out to me, and we're actively doing things together, which that would never have happened if we weren't in that same room together, able to explain and converse and sort of explain what we're about and what we're able to achieve.
This is quick fire, yes or no. Have you ever started a project and instantly knew it was going to be a nightmare?
Not instantly, it takes a little bit of time.
Have you ever uncovered something shocking behind a wall?
Yes.
What?
A skeleton.
No.
Yep, behind a chimney breast up in the loft.
What did you do?
When the client was laughing and told me it was a fake one, obviously we saw the funny side of it.
Oh my God, I would have cried. Who uncovered it, you?
No, we exposed the chimney stack up in the loft, and he knew it was in there.
But was it you personally that
I was up
exposed
there
it?
I was up there, yeah.
What was your initial reaction?
It's obviously a bit of shock, because we didn't know what we were leading ourselves into.
We'll come back to that when we finish rolling. Ever had a client ask for something completely impossible?
Yes.
Would you ever walk off a job halfway through?
I wouldn't walk off a job. I'd negotiate and try and make it work. I wouldn't just walk off a job.
Ever found something hidden in a house that you couldn't explain?
No.
Would you build a house you wouldn't live in yourself?
I don't think I'd ever be happy with something I built myself, because I'd always want to make it better. So I suppose I wouldn't want to live in a house that I designed myself, because I don't think I'd ever be happy with it.
Ever had to fix another builder's complete disaster?
Yes.
Would you ever tell a client that their vision is a bad idea?
I try and be diplomatic with the idea and sort of try and make them see sense. I wouldn't want somebody to waste their money on something that just wouldn't work. But if the client wanted it and it was doable, then we would deliver that.
Have you ever refused to work with a client after the first meeting?
No.
Have you ever regretted coming into the industry?
No.